juice. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Jerrel. I develop games for a living, and I'm glad you're here to hang out with me and enjoy some games. I'm going to take a look at Dragon Quest VII Reimagined. This is a Switch 2 version. I've wanted to play Dragon Quest VII since the 90s, but I never really had a chance to do that. I played a little bit of the game here. I carried over my progress from the demo here, so I'm so interested in taking a close look at this game. This has an aesthetic that I feel is wholly unique, and it's so interesting to me, and I would like to discuss that at length. We have seen the HD 2D remakes, which is more of a misnomer than anything else, because they are not 2D games, they are wholly 3D games that use sprites. But everything in those games is built in a 3D world, and the visual aesthetic would not work in a 2D environment. So calling them HD 2D games is a misnomer, and it is just more of a marketing branding more than any kind of accurate description. The actual correct term for that would be an umbrella statement, would be retro revival. It is a revival of the vintage era. Something that is vintage is genuinely old. Something that is retro is something that is new, trying to style match something that is old. It draws inspiration from something that is old. But this is something different. This game is not retro revival. It goes beyond that, because something that is retro revival is beholden to the superficial limitations of the thing which it is mimicking, whereas this is not beholden to superficial limitations. What this is doing is drawing inspiration from a classical era of gaming, and the 90s would be considered the classical era. And I would consider this visual aesthetic, this design philosophy, neoclassical, and that it is using the absolute most when it comes to modern technologies, not just for visuals, but for audio. We are adhering to the artistic design philosophy of a very specific kind of expression when it comes to how these characters are portrayed in this world, the diorama style of the indoor areas. If you're interested in hearing an analysis of those kinds of elements, I will link to my previous videos in which I cover the demo of this game, and people told me that they really enjoyed that, so I would like to further pursue the topic by taking a closer look at this game. And this is neoclassical. It is using the absolute most when it comes to our modern technology. So this looks so different from Dragon Quest XI. What separates this from a modern game like Dragon Quest XI? How is this neoclassical in that these characters are presented in a way that follows the spirit and the design philosophy of sprites? Sprites kind of look like toys in a way. They were quite cute, and it was obvious that these were not a literal expression of something. Their sprites were not meant to look like anime, whereas Dragon Quest XI is style matching anime to a certain extent. Well, to a large extent, the characters are anime style. This is not doing that. And you will see so many modern games that style match anime. I quite like those. There's nothing wrong with that, but it tends to be something that is very samey after a while. It all looks exactly the same when it comes to the characters. And this looks totally different. And why does this look so different? This can best be described as neoclassical. And what it is doing, it is creating characters that sort of represent these toys almost in a way. They look toy-like, but not in the superficial, plasticky way that the Link's Awakening remake did. These feel like they could exist in the real world because of the materials used on the characters. The clothing look very physical, and they are using physically based shaders which allow us to calculate lighting and shadow in a more complex way. It allows us to calculate reflections. We are self-shadow casting as well, and it builds a sense of depth for these characters, but they are expressed in a way that feels more akin to the design philosophy of sprites from the 90s, the classical era. And so we have this neoclassical style that I think is so appealing. It's interesting. At this point in time, it's quite unique. So I wanted to approach this topic from an artistic standpoint as a game developer, And as someone who enjoys the history of game development, it is a media that is very much an art form, and it is interesting to discuss the topic and to explore it further. Here we have a very clear use of volumetric lighting, and if you see, there is this soft haziness and haloing coming from the left side of the screen there, and that is evidence of volumetric lighting. It helps the world feel like it has this really deep, lived-in world that has depth to it. Volumetric lighting is an imaging technique that allows us to simulate a sense of density in the atmosphere. It simulates moisture and dirt particles in the air. If you have a look at these glowing orbs here, these are simple particle effects that allow us to convey depth in this world. You see how the particles closer to the camera move at a different speed due to parallaxing, so that gives us this really in-depth, it gives it a sense of depth, almost achieving what the stereoscopic screen on the 3DS would do. We have physically based lighting on the puddles on the ground here that help this world feel, and I'm not going to say photorealistic in a way that everything should be photorealistic, but it is calculating light in a way that is realistic or photorealistic when it comes to calculating light. We have some fog particles here. You see there's just here, you'll see a fog particle that fades in and out throughout the environment. You'll see they are billboards. They rotate with the camera. Now these light shafts are not volumetric. It would actually be quite taxing on the hardware itself. Volumetric lighting has a pretty high rendering cost, and so we don't brute force everything with volumetric lighting. We use it to convey the density in the atmosphere, and you could use volumetric lighting for those light shafts, but the performance cost would be quite high. So those are basically just pieces of geometry that have a additive shader. It is a particle shader, and it adds this nice soft haloing glow, and it is significantly cheaper than trying to brute force that effect with volumetric lighting. You know that it is and just a piece of geometry as it sort of stays in place as we rotate here. And we also have some here as well. And it looks like it's using, there is a shader in the game that I've noticed where when things get close to the camera and when they occlude the camera, they turn transparent, and so that does not obscure the view. I'm seeing that on there, so it's interesting to see that. I'm curious about the performance cost. Now, something about this game that makes it so unique and interesting, I really like the reflections on the puddles there. That is all possible due to physically based rendering PBR. I'm going to just hyper-focus on things that super don't matter, but they matter to me as a game developer and as an artist. It's very important to understand these things on the deepest level that you possibly can, and it's interesting to discuss these things with you guys. So something that this game does that, say for example, Dragon Quest XI does not do is the lighting for this and the way that they post-process and the color grading is akin to what we would see in the real world. And again, realism is not interesting. Realism is not important. It is not realism that we enjoy about these games. If realism was what we cared about, then we would stop playing games and we would go outside, because outside is the most realistic thing you would ever see. So that is not why we like these games. But I'm just explaining that the color grading is similar to what we would see in terms of realistic lighting. The haloing, the glare, the shadows are all meant to feel more realistic, and that is not something that we see in, say for example, Dragon Quest XI. And in that game it is meant more to look stylish, stylized, and style match the anime aesthetic, whereas this is not. This is doing something else with its color grading, and this is what typifies that neoclassical visual style. You look at other retro revival games that are coming out, they are using the branding HD 2D. Again, that is not an actual descriptor of what we're looking at, because they're not 2D games. They are retro revival games, because there's so many games in the past that used 3D environments with 2D sprites. It's the exact same aesthetic. Games like that existed on the PlayStation, but we don't refer to those games as HD 2D because they're not. They are 3D games. And so having a branding like that just helps people know that it is a 3D game that uses 2D sprites. So it's not really a very good descriptor, but it's just a branding that people can understand at this point. So let's see. This is so pleasant. Have a look at the use of depth of field on the ocean there, and our focus stays locked on the character. Depth of field is a photographic technique that allows us to keep the foreground or the plane that is important. We keep that in focus, and anything beyond that in the background or in the close foreground can be blurred. So we maintain focus on a particular plane. The effect on the water as the waves come in, it looks actually to be quite simple. It's a combination of normal maps, and there appears to be a layer that's just moving it's basically a picture of a wave. See those white caps that are moving in? They're not even animated. Those white caps are just a still PNG that is scrolling, and it is such a convincing effect. If we did not have there's at least 2 layers of normal mapping on the water that convey a sense of bumpiness. It looks like there may be actual geometric displacement. I think I've noticed that in the other areas of the game, but here I'm not necessarily seeing that. It's really hard to tell because I can't get close enough and low enough to the water. But we basically have a texture that has a still image of those white caps, and it's just offsetting and moving. And it's so clever because that's such a simple technique. It's so simple. It's basically free on performance to do something like that. There may be 2 layers to that. They combine that with the normal mapping, the multiple layers. I see 2 layers of normal maps, one moving this way, one moving that way, to convey that there are waves on the water. Looks fantastic. You combine that with the bloom effect, so as we have those bright highlights in the distance, it blurs and halos, and it gives it an organic feeling. You combine that with the color grading. This looks so fantastic. The composition of the environment, it's not all about brute force, just trying to make things look good through brute force. We've seen many modern games just rely on brute force to try to look good, and they look good because they're just complicated and messy, and they're using raw power to look good. Here we can see the developers, whoever is in charge of the set design, the stage design, they have a strong understanding of how to break a visual line. A flat line is the most boring thing to look at, and it is important that we try to break the line. And so just small things like this, like having an uneven composition to the rock wall here. You see it's not just a flat line, it moves in and out. And if we have a look back there, we can see just a couple mushrooms in there that break up the monotony of the brown and green there. We have a fallen log that breaks up the horizontal and vertical lines. Now we have a diagonal in there. Really, really well framed environments, and things like this are very easy to miss, and you might think, oh, that doesn't matter. It's just this, it's just that. It matters when you're making the product, and when you are composing a scene, it absolutely matters, because if you don't have that kind of understanding, the only way that you'll be able to get a scene to look interesting is to brute force it and to just randomly shove things in there until it looks so busy that people are distracted by the fact that scenes are not well composed, and you have to brute force it. This game doesn't rely on brute force. This game has very strong level design, and I really like to see that. It's so well considered. Now this is an environment where the color grading, again, this is my first time in this environment, but I've been in the overworld and in the other area of the game. But this is where the color grading feels more in line with with realistic color grading, as opposed to having something that is stylized color grading. And it's so interesting because combining this kind of stylized aesthetic with realistic color grading, generally that would not work. So it tells me that they've spent a fair bit of time balancing and fine-tuning and finding the very thin line that they straddle in order to get this to look good. And I'm so pleased. This game just looks fantastic. I really appreciate the materials on the characters. You know, you have the specularity on the helmet, but you have this matte material. You see the light catching on the very, very high resolution, and that doesn't take competence or intelligence to make high resolution textures. That's not something that you would applaud, but I feel that they have used the memory budget here very well because there's only a limited amount of materials, of textures that we can load into RAM, into memory. Because if you try to load more textures... Oh, what was that? Light sword, that was sick. Oh man, that was cool. If you try to load too many textures into the game, either the game will crash or you will get memory corruption and crazy, if you'll pardon my French here, crazy shit will start happening. One material I especially like is Kiefer's tunic. Really fantastic. It looks great. The way that it conveys a sense of fuzziness and catches the light in an uneven way, and it just looks so interesting, and it makes him have a regal royal appearance. You compare that with the main character's clothes that are more subdued and simple, and it tells us visually, it's visual storytelling, and it tells us this is a royal character and this is a simpler, more humble character. I am so delighted when I receive the points of experience and the coins of gold. RPGs are my favorite genre. I could play these for hours and hours and hours, which is why I must self-moderate, and I generally don't allow myself to play games that much because I have to focus on my own game development. And then speaking of that, if you guys want to take a look at my most recent game, I recently launched The Hero of Destiny Was Killed by the Final Boss. I'll put it on screen now, and in this game, what happens at the start of the story is that the hero of Destiny is killed by the final boss, so you have to build a team out of NPCs. You are in a town that is right in front of the final dungeon, so all these NPCs are level 0. They don't have legendary weapons, they don't have magic, so you've got to figure out a way to use sticks and stones to try to get through the final dungeon and beat the final boss. And in a way, because you're so underpowered, it's very much like solving a puzzle, or some people have said it's like a deck builder where you're trying to solve a problem using characters that have weird niche abilities. But of course you can level up your characters and make them stronger and customize them to some degree. So I hope you might take a look at that. And if you'd like to try it, if you'd like a download code, send me a DM on Instagram. I'll put a link in the description. You can send me a DM and then I'll get you a code. The game is available on Steam or Switch. Okay, let's take a look at this environment. Fascinating. I'm in an environment now where the world is desaturated a bit, and it gives it this really interesting, uncanny feeling, because we just came from a world that was vibrant and saturated, and this is something that you would not be able to do, say, for example, on the Super Nintendo and things like that. You would have very little control over the color palette and the way that you can just have a global desaturation like this. It is something that really wasn't even possible on the PlayStation, the N64. But once you get to the PS2, you had more control over things like post-processing and having a filter, basically a filter applied to the whole screen. That's something we saw basically in the PS2 era. So I'm going to save my game here. My instincts are calling out to me. Please allow me to save my game, sir. Anyway, that's what I've got to share with you today. If you would like to watch me discuss this game further, and if you would like to hear more about game development, just let me know in the comment section if you would like me to play this game more on the channel and share more about it with you. I know I got really technical today because I just find this game interesting. It's fantastic. It's so brilliantly made. I'm so impressed with the work that these developers have done. So yeah, I'm honestly, I'm kind of hoping people will comment and tell me that they want to watch more episodes with me discussing and playing this game, because I just find this game beautiful. This game is gorgeous, and that's not a way that I would describe games in general. I think beautiful is waking up in the mountains to a sunrise with fog, you know, creeping over a valley, and you see the tops of the pine trees, you know, and you can hear birds chirping in the distance. There are no cities around for miles and miles and miles. I think something like that is beautiful. But this game is a work of art. This game is beautiful. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Let me know if you would like to see me cover this game more. Okay, everyone, be well. Thank you.